afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable and distinguished guests. My name is Isaac Ibrahim. I am the co-founder, member, steering committee of an APNOR country director in Malaysia. Thanks for everyone for your registration and attending this conference. Please, you're requested to use the Zoom chat box for sharing your comments, feedback, as well as inbox. Our founder, Najiba, will respond to you either in chat box or through at the end of the report. Please turn off your videos and unmute your microphones unless you're speaking or pressing. As everybody of us now, such this time, we used to prepare for our World Refugee Day in order to meet each other and to discuss about what the problem is refugees had and to celebrate and do some fantastic celebrations. But this time, the situation is different since the COVID-19 affected globally. This conference is organized by Asian Pacific Network of Refugees. The Asian Pacific Network of Refugees is a network for refugee-led initiatives, and the only refugee-led network Asia-wide. The leadership committee includes representatives of 12 countries: Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Iran, Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. In this short time of establishment, more than 60 refugee-led initiatives have become member APNOR. The aim of this conference is to amplify the voices of refugees on the gaps, challenges, and barriers considering COVID-19 rapid responses, highlighting the good practices of refugees, the women, and emphasizes on the common areas of concern for better coordination. APNOR recent work on refugees leadership in COVID-19 responses included fortnight safety check calls through our nation hubs, producing life-saving information in multiple languages in the form of videos and proposals, targeting women and children, specific materials. APNOR have mobilized a pool of volunteers, medical team of refugees, doctors, and nurses, webinars in diverse languages on COVID-19 prevention to communities. Also provide online live conversations through Facebook every week. Refugee nurses creating advocacy messages and ask for refugees to be included in health responses plan. Initiated global advocacy on refugee crisis campaign to positive narrative showcase the leadership and raise funds for our local partners. APNOR held national consultations with the refugees so far in Australia, Iran, Afghanistan, and Indonesia. Also, put together the refugees emergency appeal, which we look into your support. Now, I would like to play a small video, which includes photo of APNOR activities across Asia.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Darius, as you hear it, and I'm one of the co-founder of APNOR and the country director of APNOR in Hong Kong. And I'm originally from Togo, and I've been asylum seeker in Hong Kong for almost 8 years, from 2012 to 2018. And now I'm a Hong Kong resident and also a co-founder of Replete Hong Kong, a refugee-led organization here. So we're very much delighted to have you all at this virtual conference today. And we think refugee leadership is taking more and more shape in many different corners of the world, and particularly noticeable in the Asia Pacific region that we belong. And during COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen so much of leadership within the refugee communities, and it is important for us to acknowledge that, and also, to acknowledge the efforts and engagement that we are having, while still highlighting different challenges and difficulties and the needs that we face on the ground. So this is what brought us together today and in this conference, and we are very much honored to have different panelists in this virtual conference who are actually supporting the refugee communities in many different ways. So we will be having 3 panelists, and our first panelist is called Dana Alanzi from UNHCR. And Dana is a graduate with a bachelor degree in foreign service from Georgetown University, where she majored in culture and politics with a focus on cultural diplomacy of the Middle East. She's currently doing an executive certificate with the Graduate Institute of Advocacy in International Affairs. Prior to joining UNHCR, Dana worked with the Education Above All Foundation as a research and policy specialist, leading on advocacy-related projects. She has been working with UNHCR since November 2019 as part of the Partnership and Coordination Service on Refugee-Led Organization and Localization. So Dana, it is a great pleasure for us to have you here with us. And just to you as a question, considering your work and involvement with refugee-led organization, could you please share with us about the importance of localization in the role of refugee-led organizations in responding to COVID-19 pandemic? So please, Dana.
Thank you, Darius. Special thank you to APNOR and Najiba for organizing this great conference. And thank you for the warm invite. Today, I'll be discussing with you, as Darius introduced, my Arlo's research and UNHCR's COVID-19 response with regards to localization. To quickly touch over the Arlo research, it is important for us to visit the Global Compact for Refugees, which makes several mentions to the involvement of refugees in the discussions and application of its plan of action. It mainly acknowledges that, and I quote, "responses are most effective when they actively and meaningfully engage those they are intended to protect and assist. Relevant actors will, wherever possible, continue to develop and support consultative processes that enable refugees and host community members to assist in designing appropriate, accessible, and inclusive responses." With regards to the research, we have found that there are many opportunities that refugee-led organizations provide and present as unique actors. Arlos are rooted in the community, which gives them access to unique community knowledge. They are a valuable frontline response system. They are quick to mobilize and provide, and they are grassroots operations. They have a right to engage in meaningful refugee participation and in shaping their communities, both in public and private spheres. And above all, they are trusted by the community. However, they face a lot of challenges, and these are just the top 3. The lack of funding they receive. And this point is directly linked to the second point, which is with regards to the inability to register the organization locally. This also proposes other barriers, such as their inability to legally receive funding or be legally recognized as local actors sometimes. Visa and mobility constraints to attend international meetings or policy discussions are also on the table. And we will link this later on to see how UNHCR has been working with RLOs or CBOs and local actors. And now we move on to the localization response with regards to UNHCR's COVID-19 response system. The Grand Bargain speaks on localization, which aims to reinforce rather than replace local, national capacities in humanitarian action through one of its main targets, which is localization. The localization workstream has dedicated 25% of the global humanitarian funding to local and national correspondents. This is an important investment in the long-term institutional capacities of local actors. It promotes more equal partnerships and ensures better integration with local coordination mechanisms. UNHCR on localization has met its localization target in 2019 of providing more than 25% of its program budget to local partners. Of the 1,000 partner organizations that UNHCR engaged in 2019, 83% were local NGOs or local government actors. COVID-19 is an opportunity and catalyst to further localize, specifically with RLOs, TBOs, and community-based movements and initiatives. From the outset of the crisis, with the aim of strengthening coordination and partnership, UNHCR has held global weekly consultations with NGOs, NGO partners on COVID-19 preparedness and response in refugee situations. The meetings have focused on protection, on localization, including RLOs, on partnerships and simplified partnership agreements, and now on new ways of working together. In the Asia and the Pacific region, it is home to 9.5 million people of concern to UNHCR, and they have especially done more work with regards to supporting community-based opportunities, response mechanisms, and efforts during the COVID-19 response mechanisms. Our imperative has been to stay and deliver by supporting the local organizations who have no other choice but to stay to deliver. To move on to a few very inspiring examples that we have seen in the Asia and the Pacific region. In Cox's Bazar, community health workers and volunteers from various sectors are involved in ensuring adequate information flows on COVID-19 to different segments of the refugee community. Community outreach volunteers are disseminating key messages, including preventative practices, physical distancing, hand washing, and early referral of persons with symptoms to health facilities. Refugee volunteers also played a critical role in helping vulnerable populations in the camps, including children at risk and their parents' caretakers, through referrals to UNHCR and case follow-up, as well as providing psychosocial support. Religious leaders in the camps have taken an active role in disseminating accurate information on COVID-19 prevention. In Iran, within the Baji Najjar settlement, an Afghani refugee mobilized her tailoring workshop with some vulnerable female heads of household to produce masks and protective gowns daily. This helps to support provision of necessary hygiene items for vulnerable communities, as well as empower the female heads of households who were also locked down in the settlement. UNHCR supported them in obtaining a hygiene license from the Ministry of Health and Medical Education of Iran. In Thailand, camp-based SGBV committees have been trained by UNHCR on a number of topics, including physical distancing, hand washing, and how to make cloth masks. In turn, they are providing training to health staff on how to respond when SGBV incidents are disclosed in their line of duty, as well as referral mechanisms. I guess just to sum and in essence, indeed, we have seen COVID-19 hit us hard on many angles, but it has posed itself as an opportunity to strengthen partnerships through continued dialogue, such as the conference we are having today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana, and that was a great overview of what UNHCR is doing with the refugee communities throughout this pandemic that the whole world is facing. We will move to the next panelist straight away, and she's called Anna Crowley, and then she is the Division Director, International Migration Initiative at the Open Society Foundation. Open Society Foundation has been a strong supporter of refugee participation through the Global Refugee-Led Network, GRN, and APNOR, Asia Pacific Network of Refugee, and other refugee-led networks around the world. So how can we leverage donors like Open Society Foundation leadership and funding to ensure that there is a direct line of support to refugee-led initiatives? Also, how Open Society Foundation help build more willingness to support refugee leadership initiatives with other donors and INGOs they are supporting. So please, Anna.
Thank you, Darius, and really nice to see you again, and nice to see in the chat many people that I met in Bangkok last year. It's great to come together again, if only virtually. First, I'll just tell you a little bit about Open Society Foundations. It's a private foundation operating globally that supports justice, democratic governance, and human rights. I lead the foundation's work on protection of refugees and vulnerable migrants. Our work prioritizes building national and local constituencies for protection and refugee rights in Bangladesh, East Africa, and the Americas, so South America, as well as Mexico, Central America, and the US. Over the past 2 years, as Darius mentioned, we've supported the growing mobilization of refugees around meaningful participation through funding support, advocacy support, and networking, importantly, with other donors. In our institution's COVID-19 emergency response, we've also prioritized getting quick support to refugee and migrant-led initiatives. I'd like to share why we've decided to fund refugee-led initiatives. First, funding is about recognition of the role of refugees as contributors to refugee response efforts and their host communities. It also creates space for refugees to organize around solutions that truly meet their needs. And critically, it serves to shift power within institutions and drive change. The effectiveness of refugees in claiming space in the GCR and GRF processes creates a really important opportunity to link the two issues of participation and funding. Refugees cannot participate on equal terms with others if they have no funding. And they cannot organize and develop influence if they are only funded to provide humanitarian services as part of someone else's plan. The issue of funding to refugee-led organizations is not new. Refugee initiatives are funded in a lot of different ways, whether through diaspora and members of their own communities, in INGO programming as implementing partners, and through various types of capacity building and small grant schemes. But this funding is often episodic and not always tailored to meet the needs of the organizations and leaders themselves. There are other practical problems that the previous speaker covered and that you all know well: legal barriers as non-citizens to registration, access to finance, etc. To get to the next level in making meaningful participation a reality, we need to develop collective, collaborative solutions to funding refugee-led action at scale. And that's where I think that Open Society Foundations working with others can really make a difference. A really important element to the funding question is developing a consensus among funders of different types with refugees around how funding can and should be done. We've begun exploring together with peer philanthropies and other types of donors what it would really take to develop that kind of a shared approach. The vision here is to capture lessons for funding the grassroots and impacted communities from other sectors, because it happens a lot more in other spaces. There are dedicated efforts to get funding to women and girls at the grassroots. There aren't the same kind of dedicated efforts to get flexible funding to refugee leaders, and that's something that we're striving to change. There are things that we can do as a private foundation with a pre-existing commitment to funding affected communities that will be hard for government donors or UNHCR to do with public money right now. But there are measures they can take to incentivize their partners and implementers to adopt good practice for engaging, financing, and building capacity of refugee-led organizations. For example, they can prioritize projects done in full partnership with refugees. They can develop criteria for quality of partnership and thresholds for what proportion of funding should go to refugee-led organizations, even if it's going through a bigger contract to a different type of organization. They can also fund in a way that explicitly builds partnerships. We've done this recently in East Africa, where we are funding both refugee-led groups and national advocacy organizations to do advocacy around the inclusion of refugees in COVID response together. They develop messages together, and they collaborate on what solutions, what targets and entry points there are for refugees to really engage with authorities in a different way. What refugee-led groups can do to help us in this quest is to network as widely as possible. Long-term trust-based partnerships with others are really important to accessing funding. This can be with different types of organizations. When you have trust-based partnerships and a track record of having worked together with others, it's easier to find creative solutions to funding for those with less developed structures or who face some legal barriers to registration. You can also be really clear about your capacity and the impact of funder behavior on your effectiveness. What is it that you need to help you succeed? What obstacles do you face? What requirements can you meet? And what makes partnership really impossible? Some donors have tools to fund flexibly, but they may not be able to help you solve problems that they do not see, and they may not automatically be aware of some of the struggles that you face. One of the things that's come up again and again in the advocacy at global level is that some governments support plane tickets and travel costs for participation in advocacy, and that's been super important contribution. But they maybe don't see that people are taking unpaid leave from work to get there, or they have to pay for childcare if they're going to be away. That's just one very, very small example. Another example is reporting requirements. Many private donors, they can substitute different types of reporting requirements. We can, for example, do a structured interview rather than requiring a perfect written report in English. These are small things that we can all shift in order to make funding more accessible to groups at various levels of development. The last thing I'll suggest is to be as visible as you can and as is safe for you, depending on your context, on social media. The most commonly asked questions we get from other donors is, how do we identify refugee-led groups? It's really hard to elevate the role of refugee leaders if you're not easily findable, and I understand there are a lot of barriers to that, but social media at this moment, when we're all working virtually, is a really important way to gain recognition and visibility. I'll stop here. We're just at the beginning of this journey and we have a lot to learn. I'm really happy to be in touch with anyone who's interested to hear more.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was really, really great. And I believe many refugee-led initiatives and different NGOs supporting refugee-led organizations will, take great, learning points from all you have mentioned so far. So thank you so much. Last but not the least, for this panel, our third panelist is Timba Lewis from Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. Timba Lewis is Secretary General at Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network, APNOR, in Bangkok. Until November 2018, he was the editor-in-chief of Rights in Exile, a highly acclaimed refugee legal aid monthly newsletter. He holds a graduate degree in refugee studies from University of Oxford and the American University in Cairo. There are so many institutions and international processes that still don't include refugee leaders into their work or their budgets. So to you, Timba, can you please tell us a little bit about how the large international NGOs like APNOR create structures and opportunities for refugees to work with them in empowering refugees? And also, how can these organizations also ensure that their programs are more refugee inclusive and focus on direct participation from refugees regionally and locally? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darius. It's great to see you. And it's great to see so many other friends and colleagues, either on the call or in the chat, connecting with each other. It's a very good question. I will get to it in just a moment. First, I'll just say that APRN is where I work is a network of 439 organizations, and we've worked to prioritize refugee leadership at every stage of our processes. There have been challenges, and a number of us have been on calls over the years, over the last year, about how to overcome some of those challenges. And I think we've made a lot of progress. And I think that this seminar today demonstrates really a significant milestone in that progress. This is a revolutionary webinar. We have I've somewhere between 100 and 115 participants from all over the globe joining APNOR to discuss some of the fundamental issues around refugee participation, refugee decision-making at top levels, and basically refugee control of their own circumstance. And this is not a new movement. I think that's something that we should note. Refugees have been advocating for themselves since efforts to control refugees have been in place. We've seen that in a number of contexts for many, many years and even decades. I think what's revolutionary about this particular movement, though, is that the effort for refugee participation here is not coming from the top down. Which is an approach that doesn't work. We've seen that. In the 1980s, there were some efforts to push for refugee participation. What was called the Refugee Participation Network was formed. It became a magazine, and it's now called Forced Migration Review. But this demonstrates that there have been nods from the top towards the need to do this for a long time. But that change has not come. And I think that change is coming now. And I think that it's coming now for a number of reasons. And I would thank very much the two previous panelists for their comments, because both touched on really important elements of those reasons. And one is that the COVID-19 situation, alongside the advent of digital technologies, has forced, in a sense, a localization, a need to look to invest in people on the ground in order to achieve the goals that we're facing. And the second is something that Anna said, which is that networking is crucial. And that's crucial for all of us. And this is an astounding collection of people. We have refugees on the call, we have donors on the call, we have academics, we have UNHCR, we have policy implementers, and we have members of NGO and CSO communities from across a very, very diverse and very broad region. That said, I think that what we need to recognize is that there are some very significant structural obstacles, and there is a resistance to change coming from larger NGOs, larger INGOs, government particularly, and this is a slow and incremental process. But our progress can be measured by events like this, and our progress can be measured by the relationships that are being built, and our progress can be measured by the visibility of refugees over the last year or two, especially in Asia Pacific, but also I think at some of the higher levels of policy making. The GRN initial meeting outside of the UNHCR NGO consultations a few years ago in Geneva was demonstrative of that. A number of the people on the call I know were a part of that process and said, look, we're here and we will be heard, and this process is starting now. And I think that that has really shifted the dialogue and has forced a change in the way that NGOs, large INGOs and networks like APRN operate. It's made us look at ourselves, examine our structures, step back, realize the need that is clearly there to trust that change, to build the relationships that are essential, and to proceed with an openness to that process and look at the benefits that are clearly there, and learn from the hiccups, which there will be with any process such as this. In terms of APRON, and I think that's probably my best reference point in terms of actualizing this change. I am not a refugee, and I am strangely in a position of advocating for refugees. But I think that there's a very particular place for those of us who are allies and advocates, that we do have some of those networks in place that Anna mentioned. We have the relationships with donors. We have the relationships with initiatives that can help to build capacity. We have relationships that can facilitate sometimes representation and travel that a lot of refugees do not have. And we need to use those. We need to put those into place, and we need to allow for those spaces to be opened and to create that enabling environment that we hear so often about. At APRON, we've actually built a lot of these things into our fundamental statutes and our structure. We've put in place policy within the organization that ensures that refugees are in decision-making roles at all times in order for us to continue our operation. That means that they're not only facilitated to be members by free membership of any refugee organization that would like to be a member, but also that in order for our steering committee to progress, there need to be a certain number of refugees on that body. We've also voted for refugee or former refugee chair for the last 2 or 3 elections of our network chair. So I think that there's also an interest from our membership of making sure that refugees are represented, heard, and in decision-making roles. I think that's pretty different from a lot of large networks or INGOs. But I think that comes down to a difference in structure. And when we look at how APRON has been able to do this, in contrast to some of the other larger institutions, I think that it comes down partially to the fact that APRON has worked to maintain a very accessible platform for its membership, but also the fact that fundamentally from the beginning, APRON was designed as a ground-up network. It was designed to ensure a democratic process across its membership to identify priority thematics for forward motion. And one of those has been refugee leadership and participation. We've made that space a priority. And we've tried to facilitate that space as much as possible. We've actively worked with donors and others to ensure that we could create opportunities for refugee advocates to come together to advocate on their own behalf without the shadow of the NGO constraint darkly hanging over them. We've created spaces where refugees and only refugees can get together to strategize, to put together statements, and then we've used our platform to amplify those. I think that the challenge is real for large organizations that have worked under more traditional structures in terms of how to make this change happen. And the first challenge is willingness. And that willingness is not only a willingness to really get into the mud and mire of the structures that have been built over the last 50 years to reconceptualize the process, but a willingness to be inventive about approach, a willingness to step back and listen rather than speak, a willingness to say, you know, refugees are the experts on their lives. Refugees are the experts on their experiences. And refugees and the other communities that are affected by refugee movements really need to be central to making a refugee rights and refugee advocacy movement successful. If we don't do this, history has shown that those efforts fail. We still see Dadaab 35 years later, a massive camp in Kenya with 1 million people waiting to be resettled. We still see challenges in integration. we still see challenges in creating new opportunities and pathways for refugees and other affected people. And the one thing that really has been missing for those last 30 to 50 years is that active participation at the top. So I think it really comes down to making sure that we are examining that are not refugees are also talking to each other about this and learning from each other about this and demonstrating that willingness to open that space, but also listening and listening to webinars like this one, listening to our members that are refugees, and working together in that trusting relationship that Anna mentioned. I've veered dramatically off of my script, but I've taken up a lot of time, so I think I'll stop my presentation there. But I just want to say thank you very much for having me on this call. I've been looking forward to it for some time, and thank you all for all of your efforts.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Timba. It was great listening to all of the details of the work that APNOR does. We thank both Dana and Anna also for your great interventions and the work you all do to advance refugee rights, self-representation, participation, and leadership from local to global level. There's a quick question that is answered, that's asked in the chat box, and we would like to see if Dana will maybe kind of, have a 1 minute or 30-second intervention just to maybe answer this, and then I can also supplement a little bit about on the APNOR side. So the question is, please, can we know a bit on how APNOR and UNHCR is supporting refugee representation, and meaningful participation at all levels, representation of refugees from India, Bangladesh, etc., representation of refugee community leaders from ethnic groups. So this is the question, that's one of the questions from the chat box. And then if Dana can just maybe say anything shortly about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Darius, and thank you to all our speakers as well. Just to answer the question very briefly, I will speak about the work that I have personally been doing during my time at UNHCR with Najiba, with APNOR, and with the GRN, the Global Refugee-Led Network. We have been involved in many consultations across the board with refugee-led organizations, refugee leaders, and discussions on how we can start to shift the narrative on a more equal partnership with refugee-led organizations. With regards to refugee meaningful participation, as I have mentioned in my presentation and has been echoed by my fellow panelists, refugee meaningful participation is a right. And we believe that at UNHCR. Refugees have a right to shaping their public and private spheres and contributing sustainably on all levels. And the unique opportunity that APNOR has presented, especially during COVID-19, including prior with the GRN and the work that they have been doing, is they have ensured that they have continuously submitted statements to us as UNHCR. And this is only on an institutional level, let alone the communication that Najiba and I and other fellows of the GRN have been continuously having. They have continuously submitted statements and updates on the needs and the capacities within the refugee camps and what is needed as a response mechanism due to COVID-19, and then the efforts that have been tremendous and invaluable that they have been doing in order to support the refugee response mechanism. So with regards to representation, I would say they have been doing a great job. But indeed, there is more to be done, as Themba and Anna both mentioned. There is more to be done. There is a need to shift into a closer and more aligned partnership with refugee-led organizations. And I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions, but I will yield the floor to Najiba, who will most certainly have more insights to share from the APNOR side. Thank you, Darius.
Thank you, Dana. I would just quickly share on the side of APNOR to speed up with the time that we have left. So APNOR has been established since 2018, and we have tried to make ourselves as visible as possible to our refugee colleagues, and by establishing different national chapters, across the Asia Pacific, and through continuous dialogue like the Asia Pacific Summit of Refugees that happened in 2018, and our APNOR Forum and other national consultation that we invite and involve many local refugee partners and so on. So there are more representatives from different countries here, within APNOR, and then you will hear more from our co-founders and to understand more about what we are doing in terms of self-representation and participation in all of our national chapters. So I will leave it there, and please stay with us, and in case participants have any other questions, and then we do have time at the end, we will bring those questions forward later. So from there, I will move on to the panel 2, and then I will give it to Nibras to carry on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darius. Thank you. Hi, my name is Nibras Rabi, and I am a Syrian refugee background based in Australia. I'm also one of the co-founder for APNOR, and it's my pleasure to moderate a panel of speakers with powerful stories to share. Firstly, I would like to invite Navid Ain from Education, who is a refugee from Afghanistan based in Indonesia, and have been managing refugee-led learning centers for a few years. And he will be speaking about education. Navid, the floor is yours.
Yeah, this is Navid Ain, co-founder for APNOR and also country director in Indonesia. I'm just the co-founder and director of Hope Learning Center, a refugee learning center in Indonesia as well. I'd like to share my screen if I get sexy. I just prepared a few information about educational parts in Indonesia. What are the gaps, challenges, and what are the needs? Which kind of activities do we have, for whom we do, and how is the general condition of refugees in Indonesia? Totally, there are almost 14,000 refugees and asylum seekers are surviving in Indonesia. And the majority of this population are from Afghanistan, Somalia, and Iraq. And the rest percentage of the refugees and asylum seekers belong to these 7 other countries that you can see their names at the bottom part of the page. Actually, the refugees and asylum seekers in Indonesia are restricted. They have too many restrictions, like they are not allowed to work, they are not allowed to go to school, to universities. They do not have the license of driving or the right of movement to the states of Indonesia. So they have to be in the same place that they were in the first time. So by each step of movement, they have to have a kind of like permission, which is a kind of restriction. But due to these challenges and restrictions, and considering them, all these restrictions caused that the refugees wanted to find a solution for themselves, and a group of them just gathered together on 2015, and they have established a refugee learning center, which was purely by refugees for refugees and are independents. For example, currently there are 8 independent refugee education centers which has been established by refugees and do the service for the refugees. And all of them, these 8 education centers are covering almost 1,200 refugee children who gain the service free of charge, and all the teachers who are refugees themselves, they are working in volunteer base. And unfortunately, there is no long-term support for these refugees learning centers at all. Like sometimes we do have some visitors who are coming individually and supporting for example, for the daily expense, which is small support. And as you know, education centers and schools are in need of long-term support for being permanent, like being sure to do the services in permanent base. And all these 8 refugee learning centers are having the same condition. But as an example, I'd like to talk about one of those refugee education centers called HLC, or Hope Learning Center, which is located in Cisarua, West Java of Indonesia. At Hope Learning Center, we have 20 volunteer teachers who are from Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and we have 130 students from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, and Ethiopia. Which kind of service do we provide for the community? Totally, there are 3 categories, like educational, health, and cultural. But first, I'd like to talk about education. In this category, I'd like to point which subjects do we teach for the students, which is core subjects of school: science, chemistry, physics, social studies, math, English, and elective subjects like cultural, painting, arts, music, arts, and sports. Actually, since our establishment on 2017, we could facilitate 13 charity clinics for the community, which were included general medical doctors, dental doctors, and eye doctors. A total of 955 patients could use that services free of charge. And in the cultural part, nowadays, because of the COVID-19, we do not have this activity, but previously, at least we had tried once a month to just gather the families, the refugees and asylum seekers, because they are coming from different countries by different backgrounds. But we just try to mix and share the diversity of the cultures because of the beauty, and also the cultures of those countries who are accepting migrants, like third countries, because that's helpful for them if one day they could get the resettlement. They may just feel a little bit relaxed and comfortable, as well as the host country or the third country people and society may welcome them, and they may accept each other easily. That was the normal activities that we have been had in Indonesia, but since COVID-19 pandemic is coming and everyone just had to go to lockdown and quarantine, directly we just switched our verbal classes to the online classes that you can see on the picture. We apply the same curriculum, the same teaching service that we had before, but it's via online. And also we tried to start spreading awareness in the refugee community. We have doctors and nurses, and they have recorded videos, and we have broadcasted via our social media to the community in awareness, and also facilitated some food ingredients and hygiene kits distribution to the community. It was like supported by individuals, but we just facilitated like receiving from them, distributing to the community. But as you know, still these things are not enough. to continue to the previous page, our needs at Hope Learning Center. What do we need here, like nowadays especially? As far as everyone is at a quarantine and lockdown, for running the online classes, we need internet. Actually, since COVID-19, the students are using to study via online, but most of them are not able to do so because they do not have internet at home. Some days, some of them are going to their friends, their classmates' house to use their internet, but it's not like that can't be applied all the days because of they're afraid of each other. The families are not feeling comfortable to accept other students to come to their house to study together. And also, some students are not able to join the class because they do not have iPads or even though hand phones. In some families, in all families, the students, the children are using the one smartphone that they have in the house, like from mother or father. At the same time, calls are coming for the phone, like texts are coming, and they're disturbing the children, the students. So iPads are an urgent and important need for the students. So that should be only for education, for like learning their school curriculum. Also, the families are in need of food and hygiene kits. As I just mentioned, we have facilitated some distribution, but as far as those refugees who are living out of financial support coverage of organizations, later on, I'll just point on that as well. There are 7,500 almost, and 3,000 of them are living in Chisarwa, in our area. So nowadays, they are in urgent need of support of food and hygiene kits because there's no supporter, there's no individual organization or association to support them. We are not allowed to have our own bank account here, but still we are using our friends, our Indonesian friends' bank account for like receiving the donations, but still we didn't have any fundraising and we would like to do that in the future. So later on, I'll point on that as well, that how we want to contribute with organizations or associations or individuals in this regard as well. Actually, the same condition, the same gaps and challenges or existence in the region countries in Iran, Malaysia, and also in Indonesia for other education centers as well. Here is the general important gaps and challenge for the refugees who are surviving in Indonesia. Almost 7,500 refugees are not under financial support coverage of NGOs. They are not allowed to work or go to school or university. The refugees and asylum seekers are asking for equality in the case process by UNHCR. Hereby, as we have Dana and all colleagues and all friends here, actually in Indonesia, the refugees in the community are seeking and asking for equality and justice. When you want to hear from them that what do you want, what is your demand exactly, they says like, we feel difference or injustice in the process of our cases in Indonesia by UNHCR, because some people are coming in Indonesia, for example, and getting resettlement within 3 years, but some are waiting for 8 years. A member of our community just said that I have welcomed too many families here, and then I did the farewell with them. I went to like say goodbye for them, but it's still mine is not clear. I mean, I don't have any response from UNHCR. If my case is wrong, if that's not qualified, so it's okay, just let me know. If that is fine, so what is the difference? Also, one of my friends just went to UNHCR and asked the the officer, like why there is a big difference between the process, period of time. The officer just answered, it's based on the cases, like your case might be not qualified. The person said that since 4 years that I'm here, 4.5 years that I'm here, there was no interview by UNHCR for me, so they can know that what is my case, then they have to decide.
Navid, your time is almost up, just reminding you. Thanks.
Okay, sure, I'm going faster. But still, like, there is no news for me, but during these 4.5 years, the peoples are already got resettlement, those who arrived after me. So that's a demand of the community. Our demands at Hope Learning Center, actually, that's a dream, that's a wish for us. We wish to have a long-term contributor who can be NGOs, associations, individuals, as we need curriculum, stationery, daily expense, building fee, electricity, internet fee, and all those things which a normal school is in need of them. So we need someone to support us permanently for the long term, so we can go ahead by this education service. And during COVID-19 period, we are in urgent need of iPads for the teachers and students, fee for their internet, food for the families, and hygiene kits for the families. That's end. Thank you guys. Thank you. Sorry for taking the long time.
Thank you, Navid, for that. Nextly, we would love to hear from Labour Market and Participation Kapau. He's from Thai Burma border, who talks on labour. Chikufa, who is a participation and inclusion of women, is currently based in Cox's Bazar and has been also an active in women involvement, and will be talking about the situation in Bangladesh.
Everyone at the conference today, thank you for giving me a chance to join with this conference. I hope I can share you some information about girls and women concerned in camps, Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. I'm Shekuba, head of Rohingya Women Empowerment and Advocacy Network. We have 400 women network across the camp. Originally, I am from Myanmar, Butidong Watfu. I was forced to flee from my native land after 25 August 2017. I could arrive to Bangladesh 1st October 2017. After arriving here in camp, I could see girls and women are very helpless and unable to extend themselves. So I decided to extend for them how we can educate, empower through education, empower them through education, livelihood, advocating our sufferings to international community. We refer patients to respective nearby clinics, especially pregnant women and some kinds of patients. We provide them small transportation if needed. We met with many international delegations who visited to camp. We raised our concern to them. If international community can take a possible step, how they can help to solve our problem so that we can go back to our country with a sustainable solution. We mobilize more women to address the current issues such as child marriage, forced marriage, trafficking, or back smuggling, which affect women in the traffickers are benefiting from the women and girls. We are working on it. By the way, there are many conservative elements in the camp community who don't support women's rights to organize and work outside of the home. We have to carefully navigate this cultural landscape. However, we Rohingya refugee women have increased awareness of our rights and greater self-confidence to assert our own goals and needs. We still can work freely for survivors across the camps to amplify our voices. In the meantime, we want the NGOs and agencies staff to work as remotely or maintaining social distance. Now, we can see the staff at the distribution point are sometimes without mask and not maintaining social distance. We are afraid of someone coming to camp, and we don't know if he or she has coronavirus or not. Let them obey the rule first. In camp, people didn't have coronavirus, but we believe because of such kind of stuff. Now we face coronavirus diseases in camp. The offices are closed at 1 p.m. every working day, which is not enough time to complete their work daily. So people, especially women at the centers and distribution points, are crowded, and they are mostly without masks. System should be improved by NGOs. For camp people, women don't have mass use practice. Anyhow, we are providing awareness on COVID-19 to particularly women to take care of families and themselves, staying at home mostly. It is raining heavily. There are many widows and female-headed households whose shelters are damaged and destroyed. We reported them to site management, but very slow action taken. So still, they didn't get any shelter materials from any sources, and we are afraid of coming up monsoon season. The domestic violence are increasing as per information raised by our women volunteers. We collaborate with Majis to reduce them. We are taking our initiative solving women issues as much as we can approach. In some camps, girls and women are abducted in camp 24, 26, and 27 by some bad guys. We followed the cases and reported immediately to concerned person and some NGOs. We are ready to work for the sake of girls and women's resilience in camps. Let's work together to fill all the challenges and gaps we are facing today as refugees. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shikofa. Just a friendly reminder for all the speakers to be short and brief, as we don't have time. For now, we will now hear from our refugee representative from Hong Kong, who wants to remain anonymous and his name not to be disclosed.
First of all, as a part of the refugee community, I would like to thank everyone for taking this initiative. It's a sign that there are people who care about this group of human beings like anyone else. I assume you guys, most of you know that Hong Kong is not part of the Refugee Convention, which is 1951 convention. Therefore, the whole refugee issue reflects a complex and long picture. Just a quick picture on what is happening in Hong Kong. So before 2014, the procedure to apply for protection in Hong Kong was under UNHCR. So they were doing the refugee status determination. And since then, the application now are under Immigration Department. Of course, they are using 3 conventions at the same time. That's why instead of RSD, they call it USM, which is Unified Screening Mechanism. So what happened actually, after landing in Hong Kong, so one may choose to surrender at the airport. Then he or she will start the protection claim. So we really don't have enough information about those cases. But others, they're choosing to enter the city and wait for the visa to expire. Then there will be two scenarios. One, they may be caught by police. Or the second, they may surrender to immigration. So in both cases, they will be detained for breach of condition of stay. So once they are released, then claimants are entitled to receive assistance from International Social Services, which is another organization founded by Hong Kong government. Then for your information, the ISS assistance is about 60% of a normal human being needs. That is compared to Hong Kong, life in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, actually, we have some or even a lot of problems, but let me highlight some. So first of all, it's really a misunderstanding of refugee issues. That is really a lack of information. The second is a total uncertainty of people who are living here. And of course, you can imagine it's not for 1 year. It's about 6 months to more than 10 years. So basically, in Hong Kong, there is no difference between a refugee or an asylum seekers. So basically, the only difference I can just state or tell you guys is that a recognized refugee may leave Hong Kong through UNHCR, or a recognized refugee may be allowed to work following a discretionary permission from immigration. So in many times, during this period between 6 and more than 10 years, legally, they are not allowed to work. So how then life of a refugee looks like in Hong Kong? It's just eating and sleeping, eating and sleeping. And as I said, it's not for 1 year, it's for decades. So basically, a refugee depends completely and 100% on NGOs, churches, and individuals. So I have heard a lot of really good statement from the previous presenters. In Hong Kong, refugees, they don't have any opportunity to be active. Participation in Hong Kong, no way. So in short, refugees in Hong Kong are just receivers. So just to make it short, this is the general situation in Hong Kong. And hopefully with you guys and with human rights lawyers in this region and in Hong Kong, hopefully for me, I never lose hope. We may we may not lose hope. And when I look back in 2004, when I arrived in Hong Kong, things are improving, and hopefully there will be more improvement. Thank you so much, guys. And for my, just to finish up, it's about us, actually. It's about refugees to claim really our rights. And I believe when you want to get the true picture of a female labor time, the right person to ask the question is the mom who is dealing with the labor type, not asking the question from a doctor or a third a third person. So participation of all refugees may really make difference between, may make difference, because I believe when people are deciding about somebody without that person, it may be against him or her. Thank you so much, guys, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, Ka has lost electricity and internet in Thai, Burma, Burda, and has no longer able to join us, this shows another barrier to the participation with us. So in this case, we'll be moving now to our next panel 3 is discussion on how our refugees responded to COVID-19 across the region. And the panelists will be, our colleagues will be from Iran, Malaysia, India, and Japan. That is, first I would like to invite Naima Ismail Muhammad, who is holding an honorable bachelor degree in public health as founder and director at Somali Women Association Malaysia, and has 4 years experience with the community work. We'll be talking about the gender impact and COVID-19. Naima.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. I'm very honorable to be sharing this afternoon. My name is Naima. I'm from Somali Women Association Malaysia. I am the founder of this association, and there are 300 nearly members under us. The asylum seekers and refugees are critically having issues since we have the coronavirus hit Malaysia and globally. So refugees and asylum seekers have the fear of deportation and detention when they go out to the door, as the xenophobia and the hatred speech around some Malaysians are being posted in the social media, and that is why most of the asylum seekers and refugees and undocumented are having that fear to be arrested and deported. Over thousands have been detained, and yet we have no idea whether they are deported and or kept in the detention, as UNHCR even have no form of access to reach out the detainees because of they have been buried by the Malaysian immigration since last year, August 2019. Of thousands of undocumented people who are the most vulnerable for the arrest and deportation, as they are awaiting their UNHCR registration. So most of the refugee and asylum seeker male allies are used to earn their wage or daily wage or weekly wage by doing odd jobs or going to work. But since the coronavirus started, it's unreasonably that they can go out to the work and get any type of to help their families and individual or themselves to feed. The next issues is that there is a high rate of domestic violence, which comes along with mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, and distress. There are people who are in need more than food and basic needs, food and rental, and they're struggling or they want medical attention more than basic needs. Most of them are the cancer survivors who are on their 4th stage of and having chemotherapy. So they're unavoidable their weekly treatment or daily treatment. And there are also diabetic patients or kids who are taking their own insulin, and the same goes to them. there are also pregnant women, pregnant mothers who are mostly those who want their delivery is C-section. They need to deposit a lot of money, which is a great concern that UNHCR are unable to cover all that cases. Solution that we as leaders are looking at is we want to do like by dealing mental health intervention. We were looking at making a webinar or a virtual training or by intervening, but some of the members they is still struggling to find their Wi-Fi or internet at their homes because of the lack of the basic necessities and lack of job allowances. So the Ministry of Health in Malaysia has been mandated that the asylum seekers, the ministry has been mandated that there should be a test of COVID-19 of the employees generally. So there's a fear of that checklist should go to the ministry. So the asylum seekers and the undocumented population having the fear that they would be arrested during this process. So many NGOs are helping out the food basics and rental aid, but it's never enough. And we are, as leaders, we are also struggling our sustainability of the community centers, and we are trying to cover the most talented women who can, as ISWAM in my organization now, we're trying to help those who are having existed talents, for example, whether they can sew their mask, face masks, whether they can do crunches, whatever ways to see that they can get some income generation.
Sorry, Naima, just a reminder that your time will be up soon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So some of our members are really suffering because of the lack of even less positive parenting, because most of them are our members are single moms, but they don't have even a man to be helping them. They have to work themselves, but they even do not know any language. So we are trying to empower by covering, providing in education courses, language courses, and we are having KGs, kindergarten, where they can send their kids to the school. I think that's all from me. Yeah.
Thank you, Naima. Thank you. Now I would like Mohammed Javad Islamazadeh from Emergency and Planning Response in Iran.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to join this virtual conference, and it's very gladful for me to share you some the situation of refugees or immigrants of Afghanistan and Iran. I would like to say there are about 3 million Afghan refugees living in Islamic Republic of Iran, who are different in terms of accommodation, like unregistered people, immigrants with residency cards under the supervision of the United Nations, and residents with passport. Afghan who immigrated and settled in Iran were mostly from the poorer section of society. And due to the problems in Iran, including the economic situation, more than 90% of this population of 3 million live below the poverty line. These are people who do not have a specific job and they are daily paid. if the factor caused the closure of their patient and they face severe economic problems. As you are aware, COVID-19 has caused a worldwide crisis, including Iran. At the beginning of this crisis, the number of people with COVID-19 in Iran was increasing so much that Iran had the second rate in the world after the China for a time, which is the why the government of Islamic Republic of Iran did the program of implemented social distance. This plan caused quarantine and closed business for a while. The quarantine and closure of business caused the most damage to the refugee community because these people were part of the vulnerable group and were mostly paid and rented. But fortunately, the mobilization of the refugees community in Iran, especially in Mashhad, was very good. They all mobilized together to help each other. The one who had a house would not rent from his tenant. The one who was tailor would make a face mask. Financial strong people distributed support packages to limited number of people, at least in their neighborhoods. Students and educators consulted with the institutions and businessmen to collect donation, and more importantly, they took on the task of informing all about COVID-19. Through the social medias group, ordinary people also began disinfect the streets. This volume of efforts need to be coordinated. Unfortunately, a work group of immigrant community activists formed, and all of the above activities were coordinated and implemented in the group. Although the mobilization of the people was excellent, but due to the large number of refugees, the aid was not enough at all. Therefore, I immediately shared the current situation with my colleagues, which was accompanied by a very serious and consistent effort by Ms. Najiba Wazifa Dost, and we were succeed to prepare packages for refugees. As an APNOR director, our team and I are happy to have prepared livelihood packages for Afghan deprived families. The food packages include rice, paste, beans, pasta, cheese, soy, oil, lentils, and the sanitary packages include toilet liquid, dishwashing liquid, soap, and face mask. These packages are prepared according to the needs of vulnerable families. Additionally, a brochure has been designed to hand into the families along with the packages. This paper contains information about COVID-19 pandemic, hygiene principles, and important psychologist point to consider in the time of lockdown to reduce stress, depression, and violence. The project covered about 100 families in their need with different conditions, such as families who have woman head of household, elderly men head of household families, families with disabled children, or families with sick members. Such assistance will be one of the APNOR's priority in Iran. I'd like to thank my colleagues in APNOR, especially Ms. Wazifa Dost, who provided the ground of sending these aids, and I hope that this will be the beginning of cooperation of APNOR directors in Iran so that we can better respond to more needs in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mohammed. I would like to invite now Vali Hadi from Refugee Responses. He is a refugee from Afghanistan, currently in India. He is the spokesperson for Afghan Refugee Solidarity Committee here in New Delhi.
So good afternoon to everybody, and thank you everybody for gathering and also for giving the opportunity for the refugees around the world, on you can say like South Asia, Asia Pacific region, for sharing their concerns, also for NGOs and UNHCR to be present and listen to them. So I'll just go on give an overview of the refugees and in India And as it is less, the concerns of refugees are not lesser than other refugees all over the world. So in India also it is the same thing, because since India is not a partner for the 1951 convention, also not the protocol of the refugees and asylum seekers of United Nations, so it is becoming very difficult for refugees to uh, live and survive in India, especially when it comes to this COVID-19 quarantine and lockdowns in India. It has become very much overwhelming for all the refugees, as there are different communities of refugees that majority who are registered with UNHCR. The majority are Afghans, who are makes the majority of the numbers of asylum seekers and refugees with with UNHCR, and after that there's followed by Somalis, and after that we have the Chin Burmese and also the Rohingyas, and also we have from other African countries like Congo, which they have numbers of refugees are living in here. And unfortunately, for in the last 4 months of lockdowns and quarantine in India, especially as mostly all of them are living in New Delhi, they are facing lots and lots of problems. Though UNHCR has distributed packages of food and some toiletries for the refugees and asylum seekers, and for second rounds till now. But still, the main concern which stays is for the refugees is the house rent, which most of them have not been able to pay in the last 4 months. And the landlords are pressurizing them, and they don't have anywhere else to go. And on the other hand, as most of the refugees are surviving in here with the help of their relatives, support from the abroad and for European or American countries or Australia. Unfortunately, that has also stopped, because most of the refugees, if they want to go to the Western Union or MoneyGram, they have to have a valid passport and valid visa, which most of them do not have. Some have valid passport, but they do not have valid visa. And based on the refugee card of United Nations or UNHCR, they do not approve. So they're undergoing a very bad condition now. On the second half, the COVID-19 has had very bad effects on refugees. Unfortunately, around 10 refugees or asylum seekers from Afghan and Somali community have lost their lives because of the virus. And we have around around 50 people, or we can say around 10 households, who are now infected with the disease, to belong to mainly Afghan and the second after that Somalis. And fortunately, we do not have any reports of infected people in Rohingya or Burmese community, but Afghan and Somalis are having very difficult time in here, as mostly they're living in the areas which are very much congested, and it is like a slum. So the sanitization and everything is not proper. And on the second half, because India itself has the second largest population in the world, and New Delhi or Delhi itself has around 40 million people. So in this 40 million people, around 30,000 refugees from various communities and countries are having a very difficult time, and they're almost invisible. And on the other hand, there is no recognition of these asylum seekers and refugees with the government of India. So the Indian government does not know them. So whatever happens, even when the people fall sick, most of them, if the hospital authorities are in good mood, so they accept them. If they are not in good mood, they say, okay, we do not have documentation, we cannot accept you. So that's going very harshly. It's a very harsh situation for asylum seekers and refugees in India, and mainly because most of them live in New Delhi, so they're facing lots and lots of problems. And I just want to point out to the refugee-led organizations. Unfortunately, we do not have very strong refugee-led organizations. We have committees of refugees with the representations of refugees who mainly usually speak with UNHCR, and UNHCR speak through them with the community to spread some awareness and all. But unfortunately, we do not have that kind of a strong refugee-led communities. Our NGOs, for example, we have very few, like there's implementing partners of UNHCR, like Bosco, which actually provides help, but it is also under the umbrella of UNHCR, under the control of UNHCR, by the way. So we do not have the refugee-led. So now the situation is actually getting worse and worse for refugees in here. And on the other hand, we have been trying. The main problem is that the refugee representation at national level in India does not exist. Even when the refugee representatives, they approach UNHCR, UNHCR also says we are helpless, we cannot do that. So that's going on very much harshly, and that's the condition which is now going on. And yes, with the help of the UNHCR partners, when it comes to education, yes, there are online classes, but unfortunately, because of interconnection and also mobile phone and everything, are their problems are facing. So these are the points. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vali. We do have Cow again. So she got electricity back, and we would like to speak short. We would like her to speak shortly and briefly as well.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this event. My name is Nakinyopo. I'm General Secretary of the Korean Women's Organization. The topic that I have to speak itself is very challenging for me because on the Thai-Burma border, refugees in Thailand are not allowed to leave the camps and work outside. Refugees are not recognized with legal status in Thailand because Thailand has not signed the 1951 Refugee Convention, but they do allow refugees to live in their land on humanitarian ground. That is why tomorrow my organizations on the World Refugees Day will release a statement requesting the Thai government to open up opportunities for refugees to work legally outside camps in Thailand so they can get some income as well as contribute economically to the country development and support their families. There have been refugees in Thailand for more than 30 years, and allowing them to integrate in host communities is one of the international durable solutions and the last one for the refugees in Thailand to get exposed to. So in terms of labor market, it's hard for me to speak, so I'm going to talk about the income generations in the Thai-Burma border refugee camps. There are some types of income generation that the refugees are doing. Firstly, refugees did receive training, vocational trainings from international NGOs in the past, such as cooking, hairdressing, mechanic for fixing motorbike and the watches, bakery, learning how to use computer and sewing. This kind of skill is helpful, but it stopped due to the funding cut to the border. And then some of the groups of the refugees, also they received small grants from the international NGOs to the community to do the income generation. So for the skills that they received, they are also able to run some of the businesses in the camps so that they also generating income for their families. And a few refugees also have opened up the shops for the food through the food cart system because refugees can also buy the food at the designated shops. And some refugees are doing small business such as having shops, selling food, clothing, household items. For my organization, the Korean Women's Organizations, we are helping women with sewing, weaving, knitting, embroidery projects. So refugees women can earn some income, and we help sell their products in our shops and also help bring their products to the conference. For example, this kind of conference, if there's no COVID-19 pandemic, we will be happy to accept orders and then post it back to the conference. It's a small income, but it makes a difference for the refugees. For other refugees, some refugees, we sneak out of the camps and work in the nearby villages in the agriculture field. And some will also do the seasoning agriculture work, such as growing rice, vegetable harvesting, picking fruit and vegetable. So if you are the refugees on the Thai-Burma border, you receive some sort of basic food, and then you will earn some income by doing the previous mentioned activities. And for some refugees, they are also teachers, health workers, community leaders, and workers. And along the border here, we administer ourselves. We run our own schools, clinics. We provide services to our communities, but we're also supported by international NGOs and donors. And we always describe ourselves as refugees who can lead and have ownership over our initiative. and we are capable of doing everything ourselves only if we are given the opportunities. Of course, there are some challenges. Obviously, refugees are not able to work outside the refugee camps legally. So those who are sneaking out anyway, to support their family, to earn income, they risk their life and face problems of being arrested because they are not being legal in Thailand, or they're being exploited by their bosses. They do not receive the minimal legal payments. For example, instead of receiving 300 baht per day, they will receive maybe 80 to 100 or 150 maximum. So they're being exploited. The second option, the second challenges would be the marketing, because like the weaving, embroidering, the knitting, you know, these handicrafts that the refugees produced, where to sell these items. So we try to sell these items, but it's really challenging for us to find the market. And then, of course, refugees who receive vocational trainings, their skills and certificates, they need recognitions. And if Thai governments open up opportunities for refugees to work outside, these people can also get some jobs from the skills that they learn. And also, for the refugees communities and leaders, they are not always included in the decision making on the—
Sorry, Kao, just a friendly reminder that your time is nearly up. Please.
Just one last point.
No
so
worries.
the challenge is the durable solutions for the refugees. So we really need your solidarities. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kao. Thank you. Okay, now I would like to invite Desel from Japan.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me here. I'm Disal, a PhD candidate at Graduate School of Asia and Pacific, Waseda University, Japan, and the Department of International Development and International Human Rights, especially relating to the refugee issues in Southeast Asia. I've received my master's at the same university too. And I am one of the founding members of the Asia Pacific Network Refugee community, or our network, what they are doing here. Our vision is to create a society where everybody can believe in finding a bright future for refugees and others, and to call policymakers and refugee advocates and developing coherent, inclusive strategies to promote social cohesion and social inclusion policies. And we are trying to filling the gap, moving beyond why to how to improve access to higher education for refugees, and looking beyond partners between international actors and national actors to make international actors to private actors in the higher education and women improvement. And our goal is to make the approach that integration concerns both asylum seekers and refugees, and responsibility sharing, marginalization of the states versus working in partners with the state private actors. As we know that the situation here in Japan is much more different than the other countries. Here in Japan, as a wealthy democracy and a strong supporter for international system, but still is misinterpretation to the Refugee Convention 1951 and less support for refugees in the country. At the data showing in 2019, 10,375 refugees were here in Japan, which is comparing to the last 2 years, it is less than half. It's the number of refugees is getting decreases with this time. At the same time, the refugees here in Japan is called like a hidden refugee, because once when they are applying as an asylum seeker, we can note where they are and what they are doing. So we call them that they are hidden refugees. But even though for those who are very in tight with us or very concerned to take some activities or support, they are very welcoming to help them too. This time, during the crucial time, COVID-19 response, the Japanese government is already 1,153 refugees are detained, and out of them 679 refugees been in detention for more than 6 months, and 531 refugees is more than a year. So more refugees cannot work and cannot get access for the government support, especially for those who are in the process of asylum application. And the other issue is that the information that provided by the detention centers cannot reach the most of the detainee refugees are foreigners, so they cannot read Japanese. So that is the most challenging issue right now. So they cannot get enough access or enough information about the COVID-19 epidemics. And some of the detainees are not criminals; they are in the detention. We can call that a prison without crime, which is they detain as opposed to be arrested or to be refoulement or to send back to the country. So these are the challenges how and what the refugees here in Japan is facing. At the same time, some international NPO and local NPOs are doing their best with the help of the UNHCR to support refugees, especially in higher education program. So far, more than 11 universities were signed with the UNHCR to give education for refugees. Most of them, they are in the undergraduate level, but only one university, which is the university where I am right now, is only allowed six refugees to continue their education in the master's and PhD level. I hope our initiative or our challenge is this way, but we are trying to convince the other universities to accept more refugees in the higher education, not only for those who are accepted or for those who are conventional refugees, but we are trying to do our best to accept more refugees. Some NPOs and communities are doing their best at the same time, especially for those who don't have a work permit. They are supporting financially and some in material things. So I would love to say thank you for all the NPO or NGO or community here in Japan for being on the side of refugee. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Giselle. Our last panel will be in regards to next steps, connecting, collaborating, organizing for refugee. On this panel, we'll be hearing from our founding members, Heizo and Najiba. Najiba is the current chair executive chief director for APNOR. Najiba has been a long-standing committed person to APNOR. She has put years of advocacy, continuous effort to ensure for meaningful participating globally and regionally. She has been the backbone for APNOR. After she found the Global Refugee Network, she put extensive work voluntary to put this network together and bring all of us to advocate and work towards refugee matters. Heizo has also joined Najiba soon after Najiba organized the Asia Pacific Summit of Refugee back in 2018. Since then, he has added so much value and support to APNOR overall. We, the co-founder, are very much thankful to both of them. They will both tell us what will be the next step, and Najiba will also talk more about international engagement APNOR has taken, including the Global Refugee Fund Pledge.
Yes, firstly, I want to acknowledge that despite many challenges, and especially during this pandemic, we are able to hold the conference digitally across the globe. And secondly, I want to make sure that the presentations from different speakers to be shared with you all. And I hope that everyone will get a copy of the report finally. And now what we are going to do with what we have heard so far is that I would like to encourage each and every one of you, especially the refugees or refugee-led organization, to sign up and become a member of Asian Pacific Network of Refugee, APNOR. Then you will receive our correspondence and as an update informations of our activities, and we want to make sure that we are maintaining regular communication with you all. We also welcome your advice and suggestions for better communications with APNOR, and please feel free to write to us. We are actually planning to have consultations with a few countries, include Bangladesh, Japan, New Zealand, and others in 2020 and 21. And we also plan to hold our second Asian Pacific Refugee Summit in 2021. And we really want you to be in communication with you. We also would like to let you know that we have already achieved many successes internationally as well, which I will now let my colleague Najiba to speak to you more about it. Najiba, please.
Thank you very much, Haiso. First of all, I also would like to thank all the participants as well as our panel speakers. I do understand that we've got very little timing left, but I think I've tried to take some notes around some of the key messages that we've had throughout the conference. You know, we've heard by all the participants how the speed with which COVID-19 has spread around the globe has been an extraordinary impact on everybody, on all the communities, but in particular on refugee communities in very particular ways, from refugees in remote or isolated camps, we've heard, to refugees living in precarious conditions in urban settings, to all of whose movements have been basically blocked also by the closing borders and increased state controls. Scores of refugees have been significantly affected both by the arrival of the virus and also by the state policies implemented in response. We heard very clearly from all of the refugee speakers how not all refugees are included within the healthcare system, especially in hard-hit countries like Bangladesh, like Iran, like Indonesia and Malaysia, how the shutdown of the economy has also made previously self-reliant refugees more destitute and desperate. We also heard about, you know, asylum seekers again in countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, how they remain in cramped conditions, and how that basically increases the rapid growth of virus within the community. I think we all have realized how COVID-19 is adding to the insecurity and vulnerability of refugees in many parts of the Asia countries. Many refugees are facing additional risks and vulnerabilities at this time, and we've heard from all of the speakers, you know, that they are having fewer resources to deal with the economic impacts of lockdown. We heard from the refugees how they have less freedom or privilege to move and have practical social distancing. We also heard from speakers around the lack of access to medical services, again due to legal status or affordability issues. We also have heard again that there is less or basically no access to government services and support. We have much more fewer access to reliable local information about COVID-19, including in community language. Especially where there are tensions between the local and refugee communities, this can become very much more worse and people become very much insecure. Refugees and refugee-led initiatives and organizations, you heard that they are responding to this crisis. We heard from our colleagues in Iran how they're providing emergency food packages. In Indonesia, you know, a lot of these communities are actually responding to the crisis as international actors are actually forced to withdraw from their operational field. We heard from our speakers how the local communities are acting as frontline workers by providing medical care, health information, material and financial support to vulnerable people, educational support, leadership and advocacy to ensure refugees are included in broader responses. We strongly believe that effective refugee leadership and refugee-led initiative existed before this crisis and will continue beyond COVID-19. There are many, many examples that you heard today again of refugee-led initiatives that are very effective and innovative and can have a positive impact. And again, because the needs and solutions are different, the needs and solutions are actually identified from within the communities. We know what basically works best. We are committed and accountable to our own communities. Refugees and refugee-led initiatives are facing a lot of challenges. And again, those include lack of access to decision makers to make sure responses are inclusive of refugees. We had, again, lack of resources to carry activities and make an impact, or the inability of registering as an organization or accessing to bank account and extra. With all of that, we are asking organizations, governments, funders, and interested individuals to consider, how can you support APNOR, or how can you support and amplify the voices and impact of refugee-led initiatives in your work? Similarly, we are asking our refugee colleagues that if you're a refugee or part of a refugee-led organization, how can we work together to strengthen our communities so that no one is left behind? With that, obviously, and with this conference, we are actually making some concrete actions that you can take with you. One, and first most of all, is our refugee participation pledge. During the Global Refugee Forum back in December 2019, Asia Pacific Network of Refugees, along with the Global Refugee-led Network, we announced our refugee participation pledge to ensure that we are able to foster an enabling environment in which refugees and the affected communities can engage directly in developing solutions. An inclusive approach which will ensure refugees and host communities are treated with dignity and enjoy their rights and do not face discrimination or abuse or exploitation or protracted displacement. Through this pledge, we commit to practicing a multi-stakeholder approach, strengthening collaboration between refugee-led initiatives as well as other stakeholders to guarantee positive change. So we really want you that if you're an NGO or a government or a funding body, sign the refugee participation pledge and commit to the meaningful inclusion of refugee decision-making. We are also asking you to get behind the Refugee Rights Emergency Appeal and make sure refugee-led initiatives on the front line to responses to COVID-19 pandemic can get the resources they need and increase their impact. We are also asking you to connect with APNOR on social media, and we will share stories and try to connect you with more refugee-led organizations and other stakeholders. Connect with us through Facebook and Twitter once again. And if you're a refugee or a refugee-led organization, please become a member of APNOR. We are looking for more people to get involved so we can get louder, stronger, and represent the diversity of refugees in this region. To join APNOR, you can email us again at apnor.refugees@gmail.com, or you can get in touch with us through the social media. We will be much stronger if we work together. I do understand that our time is up. It's already 3 minutes past. I will just let Masuma to do the closing remarks. And once again, thank you very much. And it was great to have you all. Masuma, back down to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Masuma Ramazan. I'm from Afghanistan. Right now, I'm coordinator for APNOR, for Asia Pacific Network of Refugees. I understand the time is up. I have nothing further to add other than thanking all of you for especially our speakers and participants. If anyone have any further questions, please feel free to get in touch with us through our email, which is in the chat inbox. And have a good time. And thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.